This is the story of my handmade jeans. I want to take you through my journey of making these jeans from start to finish. And I made these jeans for the Great Module Sew Along, which is a challenge hosted here on YouTube by TomKat Stitchery and Stay Stitching. I'm going to link their channels in the description below. I want to give them credit where credit is due. But this has been really fun. It's getting me out of my sewing rut. And so I want to take you through the journey. I want to show you all of my successes, but also my failures too, because there were quite a bit, if I'm being honest, but I think it's important to be able to take your failures and turn them into learned opportunities for improvement. So the pattern I used for these was N6643 by New Look. I strayed a little bit from the pattern. You can see me tugging at the back of my jeans here to show you that I inserted some elastic just at the back half, just a little bit, because I don't know about you, but I have this problem where my jeans always gape at the back, so I did that and it works great. It keeps my jeans right flush against my back where they're supposed to be, so I'll show you how to do that. But let's go ahead and get started on this journey. This is me cutting out all the pieces I'm going to need for this project. I believe this is the leg fronts, that's right. So I'm cutting 2 at a time at this point. The fabric is folded in half along the selvage. And I just folded up the pattern to be the cropped length. Don't cut your pattern for that, just fold it wherever you can, that way you don't destroy it. Excuse me. This is me doing some tailor's tacks for the first time, which if you don't know what that is, that's where you actually sew a little bit of a stitch instead of marking on it with like a fabric pin or something. And that's just for pattern notations, like where your pattern pieces should meet, stuff like that. This is me cutting out my back pockets. And then, oh, this is me cutting out the back pieces. Not much to see here. Just slowly but surely cutting. And I always use these 3 things as fabric weights: my candle, my multivitamins, and my probiotics. They work well. I don't feel the need to buy weights. Here's all my pieces, minus the waistband pieces, which that was a disaster. We'll get to that in a second. Here I am starting with the back darts. So I'm just pinning along a line that I drew for the darts, and I'm making sure that the pin matches through each line on the front and the back part. And I'm just sewing along that line. And I read somewhere that your stitches should get narrower as you get to the end of the dart, so I tried that, and I think it worked pretty well actually. Now I am sewing the seam between the 2 front leg pieces, but just a couple of inches. That's what the pattern said to do. And then it said to clip, I believe it was the right piece, at one of the dots. And that's just to help it lay a little flatter. Here I am working on the, oh, what is this piece called? The fly, I think. This is my first time doing a fly, and it came out amazing. I'm so happy with how I did on the fly. And it said to interface your fly piece, but I just used a scrap of some basic quilting cotton I had, and I think it worked fine. And it gives it a little perk of color in the inside. So then I just pinned the fly where it was supposed to go, stitched on the 5/8 inch seam line down to that dot where I clipped earlier. And there we go. Now I'm understitching. Understitching is just so satisfying, don't you think? Like, just the way you can get a piece to fold exactly where it's supposed to go. I love understitching. So here I am doing marks for where the zipper is going to go. It said to start it from 7/8 inch at the top and 1/4 of an inch into the fly. So then I'm just pinning that zipper into place, and I chose to hand baste the zipper, and I think this is what I'm gonna do forever now because it just worked great. And I used to be a hater of basting with hand stitches. In fact, I always try to avoid hand stitches, but I really do think just taking 5 minutes to do this really made the fly turn out excellent. So Would highly recommend. Just do it, takes 5 minutes. And here I am sewing at the zipper half that I basted on the fly. Halfway through getting that zipper out of the way so I can make sure my stitching line stays smooth. And then we're gonna again stop at that dot. And now I am sewing the other half of the zipper. I skipped basting that part because you just saw it, but it was basically the same concept, except this part is on the underlap. And again, stopping at that dot. Basically everything at that fly meets right at that dot, which is why I chose to do the tailor tack, because I didn't want to have a chance of the mark going away. It was really important. So here I am doing the stitching line for the fly, and I just eyeballed this. Did a pretty good job if I do say so myself. Just going nice and slow around the curve. And all done. So now I'm prepping the back pockets. And again, I love having my tape measure on my neck. I just skip marking and I just eyeball it with my tape measure there, and it works just fine. If I recall, the pattern said to fold every edge 5/8 of an inch. And here are my back pockets prepped. And now I'm just eyeballing where I want those pockets to go. I did not follow the placements on the pattern. I felt they were way too high on the butt, and I'm really particular about that, so I put them a little lower. And here I am just stitching the pocket on the back pieces. In retrospect, talking about mistakes I made, I wish I stitched on this stitch line here closer to the edge, because now that they're finished, the pockets don't lay so flat on the back leg. It kind of pops. See, you can see it popping up at the edge there, but again, lesson learned. Always take your mistakes and learn a lesson from them. Here I am sewing the inner leg seam of the front pieces. Just going nice and steady on that 5/8 inch seam line. And again, I always use my tape measure to check. I just feel like I drift sometimes, so I just like to check. Better to be safe than sorry, you know? And at this point, I had put the pants on and I just pin basted them where I wanted them to fit along my hips. Long story short, I made a muslin and the muslin fit great, and I tried transferring the markings to this. It just did not work out. It was a mess, but so I chose to do it that way. Here I am serging the side pockets where I know those seams, or not the seams, the edges are going to be exposed. Then I'm just tacking on the side pocket pieces to each part of the leg. So you'll do this on the front piece and then on the back piece. Okay, and oh, here's my favorite, understitching. Just so satisfying. Okay, now I'm going to iron that piece I just did. And in the process, spill water everywhere. Try to steam it off and give up on that. Flip it around to the quote right side, which is the inside. And so now that the pockets for each side are on the back and the front, I'm going to sew them together. And I didn't transfer the markings there. I get lazy sometimes, so I figured this would do. I'm just putting some pins where to start and stop my stitching. And you have to make sure you keep that hole between your seam line on the side so you, of course, have a pocket. Because if you just went straight down the leg, you wouldn't have a pocket. So I just finished the side seams for the pocket, making sure to leave that hole. And now I'm just going to go down the outer seam. Here's a glimpse of that pocket. It's not done yet though. The pocket pieces themselves are not stitched together, but we've got a hole started. At this point I top stitched on the front piece just to give it some more integrity, some visual appeal, because that's a stress point, putting your hands in your pockets all the time. So I wanted to make sure there were some bar tacks at the top and the bottom. So here's the point where we need to stitch the side pockets together themselves. So right along where I'm tracing, I'm just going to do a quick seam. And then we should have our pockets finished. So I'm going along the top, going around the curve of the pocket, meeting back to the side of the pants. Then you flip that in and you've got yourself a handy dandy pocket. And these are nice big pockets, which if you have ever shopped for ready-to-wear pants, you know that that's hard to find, so loving that. Okay, now I'm prepping the belt carriers, belt loops if you will. So it told you to basically meet the two long edges to the middle and then fold those on top of themselves. So this is just the process of me doing that. I also made sure to burn my hand with steam a few times, so that was great. Okay, now I'm stitching the carriers. Well, it's one carrier right now. We're going to trim them down, but the first side is always a little, not difficult, but just a little finicky. But my favorite part is stitching the other side because it's pretty sturdy at this point, and as you can see, you can just zip on right through. It's really satisfying. So we got one long piece now, and I just have to divide it into 5 equal pieces. And if I recall, I think the pattern called for 3.5-inch long pieces. I can't remember, but it was exactly dividing it between 5 pieces. And there we have it. And now I'm just going to baste these into place. I did one at each, wait, I can't remember. Oh, not at the side seams, a little bit in from the side seams. This is me doing the back middle seam. So I did one there, one basically at the top of each booty cheek, and then one on the front on top of each hip. So not on the side seams. So now you'll see I'm cutting out the waistband pieces, and the reason I did this later was because, as I mentioned, I already made a muslin, and so I was anticipating taking in the waist, which meant these pattern pieces would not have fit. But you'll see what I end up doing later. I kind of had to wing it, if I'm being honest. And again, I chose to use my scrap quilting cotton as my interfacing, and again, it gives it a pop of color. So here's me winging it. So what I did was I started with the back waistband piece, and I tacked that on where it was supposed to go on the original seam line, but I didn't go all the way to the side seams. I left those off. Then what I did was, I think this is the left piece here, the left front waistband. So I started from the front, and I'm going to meet close to the side, but not completely to the side. And if you see, there's a lot of extra fabric where those two pieces meet at the side seam. So what I did was I just pin basted it into place, and now I'm stitching along that pin basting line. And if you see now, once I flip it, there you go. So you can see that the seam lines fit perfectly now. And so the original sizes of those pieces were not correct at this point because I did take the waist in a little bit. I did, if you recall my pin basting at the sides where my hips are, I did go in further than the seam line, than the original seam line. So at this point I'm just finishing up the waistband, and here's the completed product. And I want to point out a mistake so you don't make it. Do you see how the top of that ruffles? That's how you know I put it on upside down. it's showing a difference in the lengths between the top and the bottom. And this is me frantically looking at the pattern to see if it can save me, but eventually I realized I had to take it apart and do it again. So this is the inner waistband with my interfacing I chose to use of quilting cotton. And that's just me pointing out that I need to stitch it all together, and this is how I attached the quilting cotton to the fabric. I just did very close to the edge some stitching. So there's one piece attached to the back, and here's the other. Now I'm pinning the inner waistband to the outer waistband. And I'm going to stitch all that together around the whole thing. I can't remember what compelled me to start in the middle right there, but that's what I chose to do. If you want the truth, for the inner waistband, I ended up putting the right side, or I mixed up the right side and the left side, so I had to redo all of it. It was just a disaster. So now I'm understitching the inner waistband onto the seam allowance of the outer waistband just to make sure it flips in where it's supposed to. And here's that part all done. The only thing I need to do on the waistband at this point is to, I don't know how to say it. It's sticking out too far at the front, so I need to do a stitch line to make it flush with the fly. Right there. I lost that footage, but I think I have a clip where I show you what it looks like after. No, I don't. You'll see it later though. This is where I had the brilliant idea to put a piece of elastic just inside of the back part of the waistband, because I don't know about you, but I always have trouble with jeans that gape at my back. And so what I did was I just stitched one half of the elastic to, not one half, one side, what am I trying to say? The left and the right piece to the corresponding left and right side seam. So that's the process of me doing that here. And that's what it's going to look like. It's just going to sit inside of the inner and the outer waistband. And this ended up working perfectly. And like I said at the beginning, I normally try to avoid hand stitching, but it was such a beautiful day out. I was hanging out with my cat, getting some nice vitamin D, and so I just wanted y'all to feel the vibe with me here. I had such a cozy time doing this. So here's the waistband all done. When you're wearing the pants, you can't tell that there's elastic in the back. It stretches out. But it sits nice and flush on my waist, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The next part is to tack the belt loops like that up at the very top of the waistband. This was kind of difficult to set up because I don't like pinning all that much, so I just tried to finagle it into position, and it took a little bit of time, but I figured it out eventually. So I just went forward and backward a couple times. And in retrospect, I wish I made the carriers longer for thicker boots, but here's my buttonhole. I had to do it manually. For some reason, the buttonhole foot on my machine would not work. I don't know why. Maybe somebody in the comments can help me out. It worked on my test fabric great, and then I did it on the waistband and it just would not budge. It kept stitching in the same spot. This is the button I chose. I just wanted something neutral so it wouldn't detract from the pink color. And I had to make sure to wrap the thread around the back of the button. This is something new I learned. I didn't realize this, but you need room between your jeans and the button for your fabric to sit. So if you ever wondered what the purpose of that is. And there's a glance at the inside of the waistband. I love that quilting cotton. It's so cute. I just did a simple hem at the bottom, tucking in the raw edges, and there's a final glance at the product. I'm really, really happy with these. Again, I think they're a little baggy at this point, but I'm anticipating they'll shrink. So I'm hoping I'll get the fit that I want eventually. Even so, I think they're pretty flattering and I think they're cute. I love the elasticated waistband at the top. I think I'm going to do that with all of my jeans from now on. Nice big pockets at the side. I like the placement of the back pockets. I think it's flattering. Really, really cute for summer. Thank you guys for joining me on this journey. I hope you learned something from my failures and you take some of my successes too, and you can apply that to your own projects. But you're going to be seeing some more videos from me in the future because I need to do some more makes for the Great Module Sew Along, and I'm going to document those. So feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of my makes for that challenge, or just more from me in general. I have a lot of plans for this channel, and I hope to see you guys back. Bye everyone.